Welcome to the Broncos podcast with Troy Rank. I am your host, Troy Rank, columnist for the Denver Post. Thank you, Broncos country, wherever you're joining me, on your phone, in your car, at work. It has been an interesting training camp, and man, was Thursday important, right? I mean, we've talked about expectations. You have a coach in Sean Payton who's put concentric circles instead of numbers on the back of these teams' jerseys. They're not sneaking up on anyone anymore, and that is why I felt this joint practice scrimmage with the Cardinals took on added significance, and it took on even more added significance with what we learned after practice in Coach Sean Payton's 37-minute presser. I'm all for long pressers. I was in the sun like an ant under a magnifying glass, so it wasn't comfortable. My phone tried to go out a couple times because of the heat, but I would much rather have a coach who talks forever than a coach who doesn't talk. And Payton was in a mood to go over a lot of things, including their upcoming schedule. But Thursday was about two things: Bo Nix and the number one offense. What did we see, and me specifically, that gives an added layer to this upcoming season? What did we see that was so important in games and practices that don't count but matter? I'm going to tell you after the break. Have you been injured in a car wreck or hurt at work? What are you waiting for? Give my friends at Hoggatt Injury Law a call. Their motto with us, it's personal. That's because it is. I've known Darby forever. He leads the practice. We talk sports all the time. He's a Wyoming guy, but he is a Broncos guy. And he said, Troy, you got to do a podcast. I'm so grateful he told me to do that. I'm a good friend of Darby's. Many of his clients become his good friend. You don't even have to pay Darby up front. If your case goes as planned, Darby will be the one writing checks to you. Again, if you've been hurt in a car wreck or injured at work, give Darby's team a call. If you're watching on YouTube, that number right there is 1-833-464-4288. That number again for the audio audience, 1-833-464-4288, or go to the website at hoggattlaw.com. Listen, when you face curveballs from family challenges, divorce, legal separation, child support, alimony, custody, you need a lawyer who understands human dynamics, the courtroom, and is willing to fight for your rights. You need Ted Shih. A graduate of Cal Berkeley Law, Ted brings 40 years of courtroom experience and 20 years of family law experience. Ted has been a social worker, a police detective, but first and foremost, he's a trial lawyer. He has tried cases across the country and our state. He has taught young lawyers across the country the ins and outs of the courtroom for the National Institute of Trial Advocacy. Martindale Hubbell ranks Ted among the top lawyers in the country. You want an expert to navigate your family challenge? Call Ted. His passion is putting you first. He will work to settle your case, but he's not afraid to go toe-to-toe in a trial. Ted can be reached at TheoShih. That's Theo Shih at AOL.com or 303-475-2981. That number again, write it down, 303-475-2981. And Ted promises to respond to your concerns within 24 hours, 365 days a year. Well, Broncos country, Thursday, if you were out there, if you were among the 800 that had tickets, you saw what I saw. Bo Nix cooked. Not Russell Wilson, who was cooked for much of his tenure here. Bo Nix cooked. And you said, sure, what does it matter? It's the Cardinals. It's a Thursday practice. It's the middle of August. I'll tell you what matters. And you can read about this in my column at the Denver Post, denverpost.com/sports. It's in there today. The reason it matters is because, let's be real here. Let's be fair. It had been a clunky training camp for the Broncos offense. And you can only so many times say, well, they're going against the best defense in football every day. There's truth in that. But it's like the baseball team, and unfortunately, specifically example, the Rockies, where every game on the road, you get 2 hits and you get 1 run. And we got to tip our cap. Tip our cap. If you're tipping your cap all the time, it's you. It's not just the opposing pitcher. It's not just the opposing defense. And unless they change the schedule, I think the Broncos play some pretty good defenses this year, including the Chargers in week 3. The Chiefs' defense is always good, no matter who their personnel is. So this idea that, well, it's just they're going against their own defense. We get it. We do. We really do. But let's be understanding too that at some point, and I covered 15 years of big league spring training, probably a little more even when I wasn't on the beat. There's a point in spring training around the middle of March to like middle of August, you want to start gaining some traction. And it's not even results based necessarily, but positive, good swings on the ball. You're feeling better. You're preparing for the season. We understand that. Those stats in the Cactus League, nobody remembers who won the Cactus League batting title. Trust me. But you want to get some positive momentum going. Some players don't need it. The Larry Walkers, Troy Tulowitzki's, Todd Helton's, Hall of Fame level talent, and those two cases, actual Hall of Famers. Most guys need some positive results to gain confidence. The hardest thing in sports is to have confidence without results. So that first string offense did well in Santa Clara. Most of us didn't see it. We didn't travel. And then they did not play well in in San Francisco and Santa Clara, if you will. So what I wanted to see yesterday was the offense move the ball. Bo Nix looked sharp. The decision-making, the line more on point, just efficient. Because we saw at Santa Clara where he underthrew two passes, one to Troy Franklin and one to Cortland Sutton. He was 6 for 11, 31 yards, and it could have been a lot better. Sutton had a drop in there. But the point was, he looked like to me, and I've seen it early in camp, and that was kind of the point of this column, like Bo thinks too much. It's not a bad thing. It's like he thinks too much, he cares too much. Those are wonderful qualities, but they also can paralyze you at times. He has an obsession with being perfect. But sometimes as you chase perfection, you can paralyze yourself because you're so afraid to make a mistake. So you combine his kind of obsession with perfection and a coach who is so demanding in Sean Payton. I just saw at times a little bit of timidness where you're a little reluctant to make a mistake. So in baseball, again, they call it aiming the ball. Instead of letting it eat as a pitcher, you're aiming it. You just, like a dart, I want to hit it this exact spot. So if I slow my arm down, I know I can get it right there. Well, then it's instead of 95, it's 85, and it's going the other way at 105. And so Bo, I saw that at times. And Payton is demanding of him. He is demanding of him. And there's times, even last year I wrote this, that, hey, you're treating him like Drew Brees. He's not Drew Brees. The NFL is not a Brees for Bo. He's a young kid. He's working through it. The issue is he's so damn smart, he can absorb and digest what Payton's giving him. So as a student, you can keep feeding him the information, but at times you have to slow pedal it a little bit. As I said, like Payton's playbook is more Tolstoy than Toy Story. Bo can handle that. He showed that last year. But we don't want to give him so much so soon that you lose your athleticism. There's this expression, it's more baseball related, but certainly in football. If you think, you stink. You get to a point where it has to feel natural. It's got to feel in rhythm. I can't be going over so many things that I lose what my eyes are telling me, like just to react to what's in front of me. And so that's why I felt like the scrimmage was important. And it became more important because Sean Payton revealed afterward that the starters are not playing in game 2 because they had the second joint practice in a week with the Niners on a Thursday and then the following Thursday against the Cardinals. And it stinks for you that have tickets and maybe this is your only chance to see Bo Nix in person. I get it. I didn't get to go to Broncos games growing up in Pueblo. It was just like a fantasy world, the idea you'd go to a Broncos game. I didn't go to a Broncos game in person until I was in college. So I get it. It stinks, but it is the danger of the preseason. Starters don't always play, and typically you would have been safe because Sean Payton plays his starters a half in the second preseason game, but he's never done joint practices in back-to-back weeks. So file that away if you're trying to get tickets. So next year they should start at home. They should have 2 home games because they had 2 on the road this year. They'll go to New Orleans next week. Look for that first home game. If it's the first preseason game, maybe that's where you get a chance to see Nix in this offense. But they're not going to play, but the starters are going to play at New Orleans like 8 snaps. So 2 series perhaps, 1 long series, which is unusual. They're going to practice on Sunday because 40 guys are not going to play on Saturday. So they're going to practice on Sunday and then go pads Tuesday, Wednesday in preparation for that game on Saturday, which, again, starters are going to play. But what did we see from Bo Nix? What did we see? They're like, okay, I get it. This is the guy that he's capable of handling the expectations. Because it's not a fear. It was just a concern that it gnaws on you a little bit. Is it too much too fast? He's really good. He's really smart. But he's not Drew Brees year 7. And Payton drew the analogy yesterday that Brees was so good by 2019 in operating their offense in every line check and every split. He was the chef who not only prepared the food and cooked the food, he served the food. Then he gets hurt. Has to have surgery. Teddy Bridgewater goes in. And Payton, used the example where he had to tell the rest of the offense, hey, you're going to have to boil the water now. Some of you guys are going to have to chop the vegetables. Like, we can't ask Teddy to do what Drew was doing. He's not ready for that. They went 5-0. So I think that's an example of remembering who Bo is right now in year 2. Could he get to a point of mastery of the offense with Drew Brees in year 6, 7? Yeah, of course he could. But we can't microwave it to the point where it affects his athleticism, his ability to scramble and run and make plays, the things that he brings to the table. I don't want him so bogged down mentally with his hardware that we lose some of the software. But what we saw on Thursday was a remarkable player, was the reason this team has such high expectations. I don't have the stats. We're not supposed to put out play-by-play stats of a scrimmage, but Bo was probably 80% completion rate. But it wasn't just that. It was all over the field to all different receivers. He hit Devon Vele on a broken coverage for a ball over the middle for a touchdown. Everyday Vele starting to look a little better. I know I've told you guys that before, but he clearly was slowed by a knee issue where he has kind of good days and then, I don't want to say bad days, but days where he's just not a factor. He looked much better. But you hit him on a pass. You hit Troy Franklin on a crosser and a comeback. You hit Marvin Mims multiple times down the sideline. And then that connection we saw with Sutton. You know, he's so good and balls in the end zone and shallow cross and deep cross. That's what Sutton does well. They got into rhythm and both threw a lob to the corner of the end zone in front of those Broncos country and the 800 fans. That pass was smoother than left out butter. Absolute beautiful ball, touchdown. And he was cooking. And Calais Campbell said afterward that, hey, he's got a lot of the attributes I like: the poise, the hard count, the agility, the decision making. Mac Wilson, their linebacker, said, hey, this guy, he watched him on film before coming up here. He's making plays. He's making no-look passes. I don't know about that because we can't see that angle and we don't have video of it that would be made public. But listening to an opposing defense talk in Bo in those terms, that's how they were talking about him at the end of last year. Travis Kelce, I think he has a podcast. I think someone said he had a podcast. I kid because I care. Travis Kelce said last year, like, hey, Broncos have a guy. But again, it was clunky in training camp. And we know it's there because we've seen it. It's not like hope, like, oh, but Payton himself says you get confidence through demonstrated ability. And I use the expression like it's hard to have confidence without results. That's especially when you coach kids. And once you've seen it, you know it's there, so it's not blind faith. But you got to see it at some point. We don't have to see it every day, but we just weren't seeing it enough. And Thursday was a reminder, a trailer, if you will, for the movie that's 2025, that when you've got Bo right, they're going to be dangerous, really dangerous, and they have a chance to win 11, 12 games and end the Chiefs' 9-year dominance of the AFC West. But to do that, again, I think just remember with Bo, I think it's important that Payton and Bo remember where they are in this developmental process. Don't try to make him Drew Brees year 9 just yet. Lean on the run game. And I think they will. Payton allowed for the first time on Thursday how much better he thinks the run game is going to be. Because when I asked him about that a week ago, he's like, oh, we're not going to know until a month into the season. You guys will be able to tell who's where, what. Then yesterday, he's like, we're much better. We've upgraded significantly. And they have. We all love Javonte Williams. He was probably the worst starting running back in the league last year, statistically. A-plus person, all-pro person. He just wasn't a starting running back in the league. And I'm telling you, as much as I thought J.K. Dobbins was going to start, R.J. Harvey is showing that he could be the guy, with Dobbins being a third down guy earlier in the season than I thought. Now, we'll see. I think some of it's still going to be matchup dependent on blitzes and looks, and how, can Harvey be comfortable in those situations. They know Dobbins, for the most part, will be. But keep an eye on that. But they're going to be better in the run game, and that play action is so important because they don't have burners. They don't have receivers that just create crazy space outside of Mims that can just outrun you. But with play action, you create a snippet of doubt that it's going to be a run. That creates that space for that shallow cross to get behind the line, or underneath the linebacker, or the deep cross over the linebacker in front of the safety. That allows Troy Franklin to get his body in a position with that extra foot because of the uncertainty of what it was going to be. Like, those are the things that can start to develop if you run the ball. But the most encouraging thing we found out on Thursday, it's still there. Relax. Deep breath. Find a focal point. Calm yourself down. It's going to be okay. Listen, I'm the one to tell you, it was fine to be a little concerned with what we had seen. It just was really clunky. It wasn't terrible. It's just like, okay, if you're going to talk Super Bowl, you're going to talk winning the AFC West at some point in camp, and that was the last day of training camp officially. That's the other reason why it was like this mile marker. You want to reach that point and feel like, okay, we got momentum. Now we're kind of through these dog days here. We're starting to get to the top, and then we're going to be going down the hill, entering into the season with some momentum. And that's what we saw. Defensively, we did not. And let's get to that point. It was Sean Payton talked. You see the headline there. Thanks to Danny Bailey, as always, behind the screen, who just absolutely kicks ass producing these, getting up early on a Friday. Come on. That's Danny. You gotta thank him, folks, in the comments, for putting this stuff together, because he's the best, and Nate Lundy. But Sean didn't see the defensive performance. And I'm kind of grateful he didn't. That 37-minute presser might have been 10 minutes if he had already seen the defense. They got gashed by Trey McBride. Perhaps you've heard of him. CSU zone. Fort Morgan zone. Listen, I've known about McBride. My youngest son, played baseball against Trey at Longmont High versus Fort Morgan. He wasn't really a baseball guy. He could hit, as you can imagine. But he was a good basketball player and just an incredible football player. And he played for my niece's husband, coached him in hoops. So I'm not saying there's a family connection, but there's a bit of a family connection where I've known about Trey for a long time. He and his brother, who both had tremendous careers at CSU. And then I was in a golf tournament with Trey and his brother a couple years ago, played 18 holes with them. So you get to know him a little bit, and it's easy to root for Trey. And he's gone from a guy early in his career, can't block, can't get on the field, to Zach Ertz getting traded, and he just absolutely takes off, becomes a functional, solid blocker, and he is just an absolute magnet for the ball. And he crushed the Broncos yesterday. I mean, if we're being honest, folks, McBride is probably the second best Coloradoan in the NFL right now. If Christian McCaffrey's healthy, he's number one. He's the best Colorado high school player I've ever seen in my life. So he'd be one. McBride would be two, and then his teammate Calais Campbell is right there at three. I mean, you could start debating it. I wonder if Campbell's going to have a Hall of Fame case. Certainly with longevity, he would, at 18 years, and it looks like this will be his last season. But McBride torched the Broncos, and it wasn't just one person. It was busted coverage. At one point, the coverage was so busted, he was waving his arms in the air to have Murray throw him the ball. Riley Moss had a tough day guarding Marvin Harrison Jr., where, they didn't have Pat Surtain on him much. I talked to James Palmer afterward. He was on that side because they had him on two fields, and that other side field you really couldn't see unless you went all the way over there. It's just we're not elevated anymore because they're doing that construction, so you can't really see what's going on simultaneously on two fields. Certainly I can at my height. So, but Moss, he had a kind of a day where conjured some memories of T. Higgins, but you want to see him learn from it and grow from it. That's part of it. That's why it's August. But they didn't really have Pat follow Harrison around. He's put on 10, 11 pounds of muscle. Harrison is noticeably bigger, for whatever that matters for if you play fantasy football, whatever. And it should matter for McBride because it gives Murray another weapon in the red zone if Harrison starts clicking with Murray, so they can't double and triple team McBride in the end zone. But McBride torched the defense. And that's the one thing Vance Joseph talked to me about. You heard the interview if you go to my last podcast. You got to prevent these awkward plays, these gash plays. They had the 50-yarder against the Niners, and those are the kind of plays that can be 7 points and an easy touchdown on an early drive. And you say, who cares? Most of the NFL games, folks, are one-score games. That's why, like, a bad drive, if it results in a field goal, it's not a big deal. When it results in a touchdown, it feels like you're kind of climbing uphill, especially on the road. But McBride, credit to him, just absolutely terrific day. But I don't think he's playing either. So Fort Morgan folks, CSU folks, I feel for you. It sounds like no starters. At least that's what Sean Payton said. He and Gannon agreed not to play their starters on Saturday night. So that stinks, but that's the reality of preseason sometimes. But Sean also talked about injuries. So let's get into that on what that means. And we've kind of touched that, no starters versus Cardinals. But Sean, it's the craziest thing with him. There are times when he is so sensitive about injuries. He is so grumpy about it. And, you ask, and it's like, I'm not telling you that. Ask me again Wednesday. Do we have an injury report? He gets snapped. And listen, football coaches, they're curmudgeons by nature, especially during the regular season. But yesterday, he was very revealing. So let's get to the first thing that happened on the field. It was kind of a scary moment where Garrett Bowles ends up in an ambulance during practice. You're like, oh, my God, what is going on? Anytime you see that, it's concern. Well, a couple of my friends in TV, yes, I used to do TV. I know this face doesn't suggest that, but I did. They saw Bowles getting sick, kind of dry heaving, throwing up. And so thought maybe he was dealing with heat stroke. And that's why there was such concern of getting him to an ambulance. I'm sure at that point they were trying to hook him up to an IV. I saw Garrett then walk back. He got out of the ambulance, walked off under his own power back to the locker room. Payton said afterward he was dealing with like an asthmatic reaction, some asthma. That's the first I've ever heard that Bowles had asthma. I'm not saying he doesn't. I just had never heard that and covering him his entire career. But he appears like he's okay. Something to keep an eye on. It was just incredibly hot. And for Colorado, we've been dealing with a little bit of humidity that's unusual. Usually we're as dry almost as Arizona. But this summer, I mean, you look at it's like 97 and 50% humidity, 55%. I mean, that's a lot for us. I mean, it's not the South. I'm not saying that. But it has been a little different. So anyway, Bowles appears okay. What about Nick Bonito, you ask? Glad you asked. All the conspiracy theorists had a bad day on Thursday, according to Payton. So Payton said earlier in the week, I think it was Tuesday, that he expected Bonito to be back at practice. Well, if you follow and connect the dots, follow the breadcrumbs, he's saying that because Bonito, apparently, when we thought he had like an ankle or a toe or a foot injury, it was just, okay, it's got to feel better and he's going to practice. Well, he had a bone spur. And so the way I inferred this when I went back and listened is Payton said earlier in the week he thought he was going to practice because I think he thought he was just going to continue to deal with the soreness and play through it. Well, they consulted their ankle foot specialists. NFL teams have all these specialists. And they basically told Bonito that, hey, you can still deal with this, but it's the way it is, the spur in there, we can go get it, take it out. And so you're not every other Sunday dealing with this soreness and it's nagging you all season. And once they went over the recovery that, hey, you're going to have some stitches and it could be anywhere from 7 days to 10 days, the decision was made to just go ahead and have it done. So that is the way I interpreted it. Was he thought he was going to practice because he was just going to play through it. And then the decision was made to have the bone spur removed. And so that knocked him out this entire week. And there's hope he will practice at some point next week. and maybe even play a series against the Saints. I wouldn't do that if I were them. I really wouldn't. I just don't think it's worth it. I wouldn't play Surtain anymore either, if I'm being honest. He or Zach Allen, those three guys. But we'll see. But that's what it was. And why do I say conspiracy theorists? I'm trying to get my aluminum foil, pull it off my hat here, my Pepperdine baseball hat. There was talk that, oh, this is a hold-in. He had basically almost 3 sacks and 3 plays against the Niners. He showed the Broncos, give him the contract. According to my sources, that's not it. Everything is still kind of going as it's going. And it wasn't a hold-in. It wasn't a statement that it was genuinely bone spurs. And the confusion on why he didn't practice was because they ended up electing to have surgery to remove the bone spurs. And again, when people say, well, just pay Nick, like I was saying, pay Zach Allen, because the difference was simple, folks. The market was set for Allen. It wasn't shifting. The market is fluid right now with Bonito because Micah Parsons is unsigned and Trey Hendrickson is unsigned. And I know I get the emails and I get you on social media saying, oh, Troy, you're an idiot. He's not Micah Parsons. He's not Trey Hendrickson. I get it. You have to understand how the NFL works. As the top goes up and Micah Parsons could set the number at, say, $43 million a year, $44 million a year, it brings up the bottom. It brings up the average. Hendrickson takes that number, not past Parsons, but if he slots, it goes Parsons, TJ Watt, Hendrickson. That could get Bonito an extra $5 million a year in AAV, average annual value. So my point is, his side is not in a rush, folks. They want to see this get done with Parsons. The problem is it's Parsons and Dallas and the drama fest that's the Cowboys. That may not happen until the start of the regular season. Literally, I could see it happening an hour before kickoff or 2 hours before that Thursday night kickoff against the Eagles. So that's why it could go into the season with Bonito. If Parsons takes until the first game on Thursday night, the opener, we might not see Bonito until week 1 or week 2. And again, you have to be comfortable committing, 90 to 100 million guaranteed. And you can ask yourself, if you're the Broncos, and say, do we want to do that based on one great year? I mean, I'd say with Nick and his talent level that I feel pretty comfortable with it. But that's the challenge. When you talk about these other guys who've gotten paid, they've done it over a number of years. Hendrickson, Parsons, Watt. But that number is at least like 28 million. So is it going to be 28 or is it going to be 35? And Benito's camp doesn't have any reason to be urgent. Unless, you thought he was dealing with a real injury that would affect his ability to make income. So, conspiracy theorist, according to Sean Payton, it was bone spurs. That's what created the confusion. It wasn't a hold-in, and that's where it stands. Mike Burton's dealing with a hamstring that could keep him out. And based on what we've seen with the running backs, it's very possible, I've said this, they keep 4 running backs with McLaughlin as the third. So you have Harvey, Dobbins, McLaughlin. And then I think Tyler Bidet makes it, and Blake Watson goes to the practice squad. I think he would still get through. And then Audric Estime, I mean, he's looking like he's the 6th guy right now. And if he gets cut, my guess is he would sign somewhere else on a practice squad. I don't think he would get claimed. And the reason it's not criticism of Audric, I've been a fan of his. I thought he should have played more last year. But the number of guys claimed is usually around 11 to 15 guys on cut down day, because you have to put them on the 53 man, and it's usually cornerbacks and left tackles. You don't see a lot of running backs claimed. You just don't, because teams have so many of these guys. They just don't. They end up on a practice squad. But you could cut Burton, or if he's hurt, you could start him on the injured reserve. But last year you cut him, then you put him on practice squad. You can promote him 3 times, and at some point you can just sign him to your roster. So Payton and George Payton are very adept on manipulating the practice squad rules to their advantage. But let's get back to the overarching theme of, it was a good day Thursday for the Broncos offense. I'm not worried about Trey McBride torching the defense. Maybe I should be, but I'm not. It is a reminder that they've got to stop the big plays, the gash plays. But for me, this team, its chance to be special, it's going to start with them offensively being more explosive, more balanced. And what I've seen from the run game is encouraging, But what I needed to see from Bo Nix is the guy we saw for the better part of the end of this last season. And we saw that on Thursday. So Broncos country, take a deep breath, relax. He was and gave you a reason to believe. So calm down. It's all coming together. But we needed to see it. And I'm not going to apologize for saying that. At some point, you need to see it. When a guy's, he's 3 for 22, I want to see the 4 for 4 at some point to remind me that that's my guy. That's why he's hitting 3-hole. I want to see it. And with Bo yesterday, the way he was spraying the ball around, going to all targets, and he ran more. And let's not forget, I hope Sean Payton doesn't forget to use those legs of Bo Nix. He's smart. He rarely takes big hits. Do not take the wag out of the puppy's tail. You've got to keep him in the run game. This offense is going to be dynamic. But Thursday was a good day. Saturday's the scrimmage. And then again, the Broncos will practice Sunday. They will be in pads Tuesday, Wednesday. Those are closed practices. So keep an eye on the Twitter feeds of myself and Parker Gabriel and Luca Evans from the Denver Post. Then they go to New Orleans. And the next thing you know, it's cut down day. Then they got a little time off. And then it's September 7th opener against Cam Ward and the Titans. It's not that far off. That's why Thursday was so big. Folks, again, thank you, Broncos country, for your support of the pod. I'll have another pod. I got a great interview with Justin Sternad, who's been starting all camp at inside linebacker because they're easing Dre Greenlaw back. An update on him. They're hopeful he'll practice next week. Still dealing with some scar tissue, it appears, in his quad injury, but definitely pointing in the right direction, and they need him. But Sternad is just such a wonderful piece to have, both as a reserve player and on special teams. And he showed he could start and fill in if necessary. So we'll have that next week. Folks, I could not do this pod without Nate Lundy, Danny Bailey, Mile High Sports are the best. Darby Hoggatt from Hoggatt Injury Law and Ted Shih and his family practice. Broncos country, I do this pod for you. Happiness, that begins with me. Go out there and have a great day.